Hey there, just a heads up, this story is going to be a bit heavy. It's pretty sad, but I think it's important to share. If it were to happen to me and my family, I'd want people to be aware. So, I'll do my best to do it justice. Back in 1996, 21-year-old Katie Fleming was a French student at the University of Oregon. During that summer, she was invited on a camping trip with close friends and some new acquaintances. Their destination? A beautiful spot in the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California. However, Katie's attention was immediately captured by 25-year-old James Kim, someone she hadn't met before the trip. For everyone involved, it was clear that James and Katie quickly fell in love during the journey, becoming inseparable. After the camping adventure, James made a big move from Seattle to Oregon to be with Katie. Following Katie's graduation, they tied the knot in Las Vegas and settled in San Francisco. James, being a tech enthusiast, landed a job with a tech company where he got to test and review new gadgets for the average consumer. Essentially, he got paid to play with cool toys, and he absolutely loved his job. The couple also ventured into entrepreneurship, opening 2 stores in San Francisco, an apothecary and a shop selling unique clothing. Katie managed both stores full-time. Fast forward to 2006, the Kim family had not only achieved financial success but also expanded. They were now a family of 4, with a 4-year-old daughter named Penelope and a 7-month-old daughter named Sabine. Katie and James absolutely loved their kids, but James had a reputation for dropping everything and everyone just to spend time with his daughters. Friends and family would joke that if the girls were in the room, having a conversation with James was impossible because he'd get so distracted, often leaving mid-chat to play with them. James even took his daughters to work, bending the rules a bit. On Friday, November 17th, the family packed into their station wagon and drove from San Francisco to Seattle. Their plan was to celebrate Thanksgiving with James's aunt and uncle and explore Seattle, considering it as a potential new home. After a wonderful Thanksgiving in Seattle, they loaded up the car again on November 24th to head back to San Francisco. However, instead of driving straight through, they decided to stop in Portland for lunch with one of Katie's close college friends. After a pleasant lunch, they checked into a hotel for the night. The original plan for the next day was to drive straight home, but Katie suggested breaking up the journey by staying at a family-friendly spot almost halfway between Portland and San Francisco. They found the 2-2-ton lodge on the Oregon coast in Gold Beach, made reservations, and set off in the afternoon. Around 8:30 p.m., still on the road, hunger struck James, and he suggested stopping for a bite to eat. The family decided to stop at a Denny's in Central Oregon for a quick bite to eat. After their meal, they hit the road again at 9 p.m. Their original plan was a 2.5-hour drive to the 2-2-ton lodge. However, after 2 hours, James realized they missed a turn. Going back would add a lot of time to their trip, so they found an alternative route. Instead of heading west to the coast and then south as planned, they decided to go south and then cut west along a road called Bear Camp Road. The map didn't highlight how perilous this road was. While it's paved, it's narrow, carved into a mountainside with steep drop-offs and no guardrails. The road climbs from 900 to 4,000 feet elevation before descending to Gold Beach, where the lodge was. Bear Camp Road is maintained only in the summer, and in winter, it becomes impassable with no plowing. It's in a remote area, and the Kims were unaware of these risks. After turning onto Bear Camp Road, they slowly ascended the mountain. As James drove, Katie and the kids fell asleep, and outside, it started snowing. An hour later, Katie woke up to heavy snowfall. James struggled to see, even with the wipers on full blast. Concerned, Katie asked if they should stop or turn around. James, focused on the road, mentioned they passed a spot to turn earlier, hoping for another opportunity. Despite Katie's unease, she trusted James, and they continued up the mountain pass, essentially driving on a cliff edge covered in slick snow. It turned into an incredibly stressful journey, and after covering more miles, they couldn't find a place to turn around. They even had to stop on inclines, put up the emergency brake, and clear obstacles from the narrow road. Eventually, Katie told James they had to stop and back out of there. It seemed like their only option. So, James carefully put the car in reverse, opened his door to keep an eye on the cliff's edge, and slowly backed up without applying the gas. This went on for hours, adding to the already intense stress. Finally, they reached a fork in the road that James had spotted much earlier. Now they had a decision to make: go back the way they came, a treacherous route with a cliff drop-off, or take a left down a wider path that seemed to lead down the mountain. Uncertain of where it went, They figured going lower in elevation might bring better weather or lead to houses or a gas station. With that, James turned the car down the new road, unaware that this was the worst choice. The road they chose was a long, winding dead end used by loggers in the summer. Normally, there would have been a big yellow gate blocking traffic a little past the fork, but vandals had tampered with it recently, leaving it wide open. The Kims drove past where the gate should have been, not realizing there was any obstruction. The paved road turned into a dirt path full of potholes, narrowing considerably as they drove for 15 miles on a cliffside. They reached another fork with no signage indicating where each path led. Stuck in the middle of this intersection, James and Katie knew they were in trouble. Attempting to call for help, they discovered they had no cell service. As they struggled with their phones, they noticed the rain washing away the snow. Unable to make calls, they decided to sleep in the car with it running for warmth, hoping the rain would clear the snow by morning so they could drive out. As the night went on, Katie and James found some relief in convincing themselves that the situation wasn't as bad as it seemed. They fell asleep with the car running, enjoying the warmth. However, when they woke up, the reality had worsened overnight. The rain had turned into heavy snow, freezing on the ground with nearly a foot of snowfall. Despite the challenging circumstances, Katie and James tried to stay calm. They recalled seeing a plow truck parked on Bear Camp Road when they first turned onto it, leading them to believe the road would get plowed if it snowed. Throughout the day, they stayed inside the car, snacking, reading books, and keeping the heater on, hoping to be rescued. Unfortunately, no plows or help arrived. They repeatedly attempted to use their cell phones but had no service, and honking the horn yielded no response. By Sunday night, worry set in for Katie and James, especially with their young daughters. They comforted each other with the thought that plows might not work on Sundays, and Monday would bring rescue. They also reassured themselves that someone would notice their absence and report it to the police. With these thoughts, they put their daughters to bed and fell asleep. On Monday, they continued their routine, trying to use their phones and honking the horn in hopes of attracting attention. No trucks or plows appeared on the road. Meanwhile, back in San Francisco, a family friend noticed the absence but assumed the Kims were extending their trip. By Monday night, Katie and James were truly frightened. Their car was running low on fuel, and their food supply was almost gone. To cope, Katie resorted to breastfeeding both her 7-month-old and 4-year-old. Outside the car, bears gathered, initially causing the family to shout and attempt to scare them away. But the bears were not aggressive, but their presence made the family hesitant to leave the safety of the car. In this tight and confining situation, the family found themselves literally trapped inside a small car, with snow covering all the windows. They couldn't go anywhere, make calls, and their supplies were running out. It was genuinely terrifying. Katie and James, who had been strong until now, began to show fear, and their kids picked up on it, becoming scared and anxious. Despite the parents' efforts to reassure them, the reality was sinking in. Without rescue soon, their lives were at risk. On Tuesday, no cars or trucks came down the road, no plows in sight, and the snow kept piling up. Supplies were running unbelievably low, prompting James to venture outside to look for berries and bear droppings. However, they realized this was too risky. The daughters, once fearful, became lethargic. The parents, overwhelmed by fear, began to argue about whose fault it was, masking their own anxiety. In San Francisco, the family still hadn't been reported missing. Tuesday night, they huddled up in the car again, with James reading the kids' books before they all fell asleep. By Wednesday, they ran out of gas, leaving them without heat. James improvised a fire with a spare tire and magazines, but it didn't last. Desperate, they scanned the road all day for any sign of help, tried their cell phones, honked horns, and screamed, but nothing reached beyond the silent wilderness. Darkness fell again, and they were huddled in the freezing car, surrounded by the sounds of bears. Unbeknownst to them, in San Francisco, the family friend who noticed their absence on Monday finally reported them missing on Wednesday afternoon. A search party was being organized that night. The next morning, Thursday, the family woke up having survived another night. However, the harsh reality set in, and Katie openly discussed the possibility of death. She even asked James to promise that if their kids died, he would end her life too. At this point, they didn't believe a vehicle would rescue them. Their only hope lay in sending a smoke signal that a pilot might see. In a desperate move, the Kim family decided to create a smoke signal to attract attention. They took off all 4 tires of their car, gathered anything combustible, including Penelope's cherished stuffed lamb, and set a fire. A large cloud of smoke rose, and momentarily, they felt optimistic that rescue was imminent. However, the fire burned out quickly, and no help arrived. Once again, they found themselves huddled inside their freezing car, surrounded by bears and running low on food. Realizing the gravity of the situation, James knew he had to take drastic action to save his family. On Friday morning, he informed Katie that he had studied the map and believed he could reach a town called Gallus about 4 miles east in approximately 2 hours. Katie was initially hesitant, fearing that they should stay together for a potential search party. James, however, felt that waiting was not their best option. Reluctantly, Katie agreed to let him go, and at 7:45 a.m., James hugged and kissed his daughters, expressed his love, and reassured his wife before heading up the road out of sight. Unbeknownst to the Kim family, a massive search effort was underway, with helicopters scouring Bear Camp Road. 2 days later, on Sunday, December 3rd, a helicopter pilot spotted footprints in the snow during the search. Following the footprints led them to a clearing where Katie was waving an umbrella. The pilot couldn't land due to low fuel but reassured Katie by making eye contact and marking their location on the map. Another helicopter was sent, landed in the clearing, and found Katie with her daughters. Overjoyed, she explained that James had left for Gallus 2 days earlier to seek help and hadn't returned. The helicopter pilot, upon realizing the situation, sadly informed Katie that James had not been found yet. Overwhelmed with devastation, she and her daughters were airlifted to a hospital where they eventually recovered. The search effort, now concentrated around the car's location, enlisted professional trackers to follow James's trail. After leaving his family, James walked 3 miles along the road they came in on, deviating off the road and descending a cliff to reach a river. He left torn clothing and paper shreds to mark his path, possibly to backtrack if needed. Walking downstream for several miles, he must have realized he hadn't reached Gallus and could have gone the wrong way or miscalculated the distance. Instead of returning to his family, he pressed on, crossing rivers, enduring freezing temperatures, and traversing rugged terrain with only street clothes, sneakers, pants, and a jacket. By nightfall, having covered about 10 miles, he laid down for a night of survival. Despite physical exhaustion, he resumed the journey the next morning, hiking through freezing streams and challenging landscapes in a desperate effort to find help for his family. Despite his deteriorating condition, he pushed on until he reached the bottom of a ravine by a river, where he fell to his knees and succumbed to hypothermia. James's body was discovered 2 days after his family's rescue. It was revealed that Gallus was not just 4 miles away, it was approximately 15 miles. The challenging wilderness terrain made the journey nearly impossible, involving zigzagging across mountains for about 30 or 40 miles. It became a tragic and ultimately unsuccessful mission to seek help for his family. James traversed an astonishing 16 miles through incredibly challenging terrain, all while dressed in just his everyday clothes. The professional trackers who followed his remarkable journey referred to it as superhuman. The helicopter pilot emphasized that if he hadn't noticed those footprints and traced them back to the clearing, he wouldn't have found Katie and the girls. Remarkably, those footprints were left by James as he ventured off to seek help. Despite the tragic outcome, James's courageous effort ultimately played a crucial role in saving his family.